you guys are here, so yeah, I guess we can just kick off and address any questions you all have, and if no one else shows up, we'll just call her good. So, um, Taylor Jordan, anything that I can help you with in terms of questions on this material, anything that's giving you fits?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Do we need to understand and know, or just know like all five definitions for emotion?
Yeah, that's a good question, Taylor. That you don't need to memorize any of those definitions. That was just kind of a demonstration in terms of, to show that emotion is difficult to define in terms of an operationalization. So don't worry about memorizing each one of those definitions. That won't be necessary.
And then can you go over the automatic processing and the divine? I forgot what happened with that.
Yeah. So let me see here. We'll share this screen. All right. So with the, is it this study, the divine study?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, remember what we did is Divine went through and they ran a sequence of studies to try and highlight, so to demonstrate this model that they had. And so in the first, so with each one of these studies, what they did is they recruited people based on some sort of screener known for being high or low in stereotypes against Black Americans. Okay, so they just had a high prejudice group and a low prejudice group that they knew that they pulled in to this study. And so in the first study, they just asked both groups to list Black stereotypes, and everybody was equally knowledgeable about Black stereotypes. So your level of prejudice held against Black Americans had nothing to do with sort of knowledge of stereotypes. So just demonstrating that irrespective of sort of how we feel and what we believe, that people are generally aware of the stereotypes about a stereotyped group. Okay. Then the second study, this is where they went through and looked at that automatic stereotype processing. Okay. So again, what they did is they recruited individuals to who were high in prejudice and low in prejudice. Okay, and what they told them, they were going to do some sort of reaction task or something like that, right? And so they said, okay, what we want you to do is, as quickly as you can, just tell us on this keyboard, hit right or left, whether or not this word, whatever flashes up on the screen, falls to the right or the left side of this fixation point. So what we do is we have you look at this screen, and in the screen there's a dot in the middle of it. And all you have to do is just hit right or left. Was the whatever was flashed up was the right of the dot or the left of the dot. Okay. Now, what was actually going on is they were flashing below the threshold of perception words. Okay. And some of these words were consistent with Black stereotypes, and other words were not. Well, other words, just neutral words. Okay. And so the participants, as they were going through and getting these words flashed in, couldn't read them. They were presented below the threshold of awareness with a mask over the top. And so afterwards, when they asked people, okay, so do you recognize these words? People didn't recognize any of the words because, they were presented too fast. Well, what they did is they split people up into two groups. The one group, 80% of the words that were flashed up were consistent or relevant to Black stereotypes. The other 20%, or the other group only had 20% of the words that were consistent with Black stereotypes. So you've got a high prejudice group, or a high primed group, and a low primed group. And then, so people who were both high and low prejudice got randomized to both of those. Okay. And so then what they did is, after they went through and they identified a bunch of different words, or sort of went through and just said right or left on where whatever it was flashed, then they asked people to rate the personality of this character, Donald, in this scenario. And Donald's doing things that are vaguely sort of aggressive or sort of kind of hostile, right? And then afterwards they say, okay, we'd like to rate you to rate Donald on a list of characteristics. And 6 of them had to do with aggression, the other 6 didn't. And what they found was that irrespective of whether or not people came in and had high or low levels of prejudice, okay, so regardless of where you're coming in, those individuals who were in the condition where 80% of the prejudice of the words that were flashed up were consistent with prejudice words or prejudice relevant words, those individuals rated this Donald character as systematically more aggressive than the individuals who had been exposed to lower prejudice words. Okay, and so again, the idea here is that even though no one knew or sort of was able to identify what words they saw, and it didn't matter whether or not you were high or low prejudice, those individuals who were exposed to a higher proportion of prejudice relevant words, those were the people who went through and rated this Donald character as more aggressive relative to the people who were exposed to a higher percentage of neutral words. Okay, so does this kind of help you out with does this help out with sort of identifying kind of where this stuff is at, or how they went through and used it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and then the last study, what they did is they just had thoughts related to Black Americans. So they just had, again, recruited higher and low prejudice groups and just said, hey, tell us what you think about Black Americans. And people who are high in prejudice said prejudice stuff, and people who were low in prejudice didn't say prejudice things, right? And so just recognizing that, yeah, although we're all aware of stereotypes, and we may be vulnerable to implicit processing, right? So I can get primed by things that are probably occurring outside of my awareness, right? But still, if I'm asked to sort of explicitly state sort of my thoughts, we still have control, obviously, of the types of things we believe, and just kind of going back and filling out this this model here.
Thank you.
Okay. Jordan, are you clear on that? You okay with this sort of section here?
Yeah,
okay.
That was actually going to be one of my questions, so that's good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and so again, just wanting to, with this research, and then obviously stuff that's followed up after it, just demonstrating that, some of the influences on our behavior are going to be very subtle and influenced by things that are going on maybe outside of my explicit awareness, right? Because again, the people who were exposed to the high prejudice words didn't know they were exposed to high prejudice words. They just saw things flash up on the screen. But still, evidence from this study and some subsequent ones suggesting that that's being processed sort of outside of my awareness there and can still subtly impact my behavior.
So this, I guess, is kind of related in
Yeah.
that, why, I get why they make such a big deal about, racial issues and stuff, but, if people are being primed by, the media or whatever to be more racist, or they're getting, consuming lots of racial media, how do you overcome those prejudices, I guess?
Yeah, it's a tough situation, right? When we get into some of the stuff that we didn't get into with the pro-social relationships and the helping behaviors and things like that, this can be difficult to combat. Now, if you've got sort of mere exposure, right? So if you have people who are, say, not prejudiced against a group, or don't endorse certain stereotypes of a group, some evidence that just sort of being around those groups starts to sort of make that group thing less salient, right? And so, Jordan, where are you from originally?
Gillette, Wyoming.
Okay, so probably not a large Black population in Gillette, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, right. But And so even if you're a person who's doesn't hold prejudice against Black Americans or any other group, right? Gillette, Wyoming, all of Wyoming is pretty homogenous, right? And so it's possible that if you were to say in a larger city with a larger Black community or something like that, that things in that community could prime certain stereotypes that could start to sort of influence behavior in subtle ways. But if you're not, if you don't endorse stereotypes about Black Americans and you're sort of immersed in that sort of culture and in those areas, probably some of those things it's just not a novel trigger. It would probably not sort of activate so much, right? So there's some exposure types of things that can go through and potentially reduce some of this. But the tricky thing is if for people who do hold stereotypes and who are engaged in actual prejudice, explicit prejudice behavior, just being around people from a different group, probably isn't going to reduce that prejudice, right? Because otherwise you'd see places like where there's long-standing sort of racial conflict. So let's say maybe parts of the South or areas throughout the world where you've got people who their ethnic divisions where they've fought long wars and prejudice, and obviously those people have been around each other for a long time, and it doesn't solve anything, right? So some evidence that working towards a cooperative goal can start to help reduce some of that. And it's a movie cliche, but if we're all in it together, even if you and I don't like one another and I think you're this way and you think I'm that way, if we were forced to come together to work towards some common goal, that can help reduce some things, right? So just being aware that these things happen and can impact our behavior, and just being sort of being cautious about sort of recognizing when stuff can come up, that can do it. And then sort of a lot of in sociology, political science, international relations, some restorative justice types of interventions where you've got, let's say, South Africa, where you've got white and Black populations that have had power imbalance and things that go on. Or, I've got a friend who does this Northern Ireland, right, where you have different religious communities who have a long history of violence and things like that, having people come together and sort of engage in some reconciliation types of things. Really, really complicated. And sometimes results aren't what we would hope for, but ways to start to chip away at some of this stuff.
Gotcha, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions on stuff you guys have?
Could you go through the discrete perspectives of emotion?
Yeah. Pull this up. Okay. So, all right. And was this Taylor? Was this you or was this Jordan? Who's
Jordan? But I actually was wondering the same thing. So
okay. So basically, we got a couple different perspectives on emotion. One, and which we're not touching on here, is a dimensional model of emotion. Dimensional model of emotion generally propose that we can quantify or understand emotion based on dimensions of valence and arousal. Okay, so dimensional model of emotion would say that for emotions, we can reasonably measure these in terms of their valence, in terms of how pleasant or unpleasant they are. On one end, you've got unpleasant emotions. On the other side, you have pleasant emotions, and then a level of arousal. So how much activation from calm to very excited, agitated, right? And so you would think something like sadness would be low valence, but low arousal, right? If I'm sad, it's sort of like low energy type of thing, versus if I'm very angry, right? That's going to be low valence, but high levels of arousal, okay? Something like contentment is going to be, moderate levels of valence, so I'm feeling pretty good, but low levels of arousal, joy and excitement, high levels of valence, high levels of arousal. So thinking about ordering things on there. Okay, discrete perspective takes a different approach. They say, emotions aren't best understood along these two dimensions. What we have is biologically programmed set of discrete fundamental emotions. Okay, within all of us, we have certain programs that are universal for a handful of primary sort of like basic emotion states. And depending on what theory you look at, somewhere between 6 or 12 primary emotions, right? So this, instead of saying, oh, our emotional behavior runs on sort of pleasant to unpleasant, calm to excited dimensions, discrete emotion perspective is going to say what we have are discrete, unique emotion states, right? And so things like anger and disgust and fear, surprise, joy, interest, distress, like these are fundamental, like genetically, evolutionarily developed emotion states that should be identified and thought of as categories, as opposed to, oh, we're just going to sort of place these on these dimensions and think about them that way. And so a lot of the expressive behavior stuff that we're looking at in this slide sort of draws from this discrete perspective, and the idea being that we have hardwired into us these sort of programs and these tracks for certain core emotions that are expressed in a similar way across all cultures and civilizations, right? Now there are different display rules, right? If I'm in some cultures, sort of the rules about what's appropriate for me to display in terms of emotion sort of varies, right? And the intensity at which it's reasonable to display. But if I brought in someone from a culture that you had never heard of or had anything about, and I had that person experience joy or sadness or fear or anger or disgust, you would probably be able to sort of code very easily what emotion that person was experiencing, even though you had no connection or idea about anything about that culture. And again, pulling into this idea of discrete emotions as being sort of kind of hardwired things in us. And then other types of emotion being kind of a blend of those primary sets. Does that help clarify that a bit?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Other stuff. Pretty much cover your bases?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good too.
All right. Cool. Well, hey, thanks you guys for showing up. If anything comes up as you're going through and studying for this, let me know. Again, remember that even though we didn't get into that pro-social, that last module, make sure that you do go through, read that module, take notes on that, because stuff from that's likely to pop up in those last 10 questions. Just want to make sure you cover it. It's important stuff, and I like to be able to get into that so we don't just end this section on people are inherently terrible and will do terrible things to one another given the proper social situations. So make sure that you go through and read that, have a good handle on that. But if any of that comes up, obviously just shoot me an email, let me know.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. You guys have a good night, and we'll catch you on Friday, I guess.
All right. See you.
We'll see ya.